Were you familiar with the role water plays in many West and Central African traditions? Water libation is a very important thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. In fact, I have included libations spontaneously. One time I was at Annie Sprinkle's house and we were talking, and we had just done Pride Festival. And Annie brought the whole ecosexual energy to the march. We were there with Guillermo Gomez Pena and Bali Electronica. It was amazing. And we were talking and we were getting excited. At one point, someone knocked a bottle off the table and it spilled on the floor. Like, that's the ancestors, they're here with us. But it was like the timing of it, it really literally felt like ancestors had come into the room and moved that bottle off the table. The timing was just...
They did.
They did. Mm-hmm. They did. Yeah. Because that was how I got that water is life, earth is our home, in that same space, opening myself up to the ancestors, and that came through me.
Were you saying the five-fingered chicken is the first?
Yeah, I was going to start the lecture talking about that because it's. I was going to start the lecture talking about both creation stories. There's the creation story of the Yoruba, which also has a chicken, and then there's the creation story of the Congo, which is the dance between the rooster and the chicken. You know, when you look at the rumba is a chicken dance. It's the funky chicken.
Oh, wow. The rumba. Latin American dance? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Congo. The chicken is very important. That's why you see in both cultures sculptures of chicken and chicken sacrifice is very important. The chicken is one of the animals that we equate with humanity, like the apes, the chicken. There's certain animals that we see our reflection in very easily, dogs, and these animals are usually reflections of the Orisha. And the special thing about, say, the chicken and the leopard is that all the Orisha, all the spirits take chicken, and all the spirits take leopards. They say that a leba can turn into a leopard, just like the street can turn into a leopard and kill you, just like the mountain can turn into a leopard and kill you. When we beginning?
Yeah, we started already.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to get us on Instagram, which isn't working, but we're on Facebook and the video and the recording is happening.
Cool.
Good to go.
So,
I'm gonna have to run out for a minute and I'll be right back. I don't mean to interrupt anything.
Yeah,
I might just have to come and go.
Do your thing. Real free form here. And of course anybody that has to do anything, feel free to do it. And if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. If you have any comments, this is, I really like to think of this as a cipher. And all of us have something to learn from all of us. And if you have a gem that you want to drop, there's no swine here. We can all enjoy any gem you got to drop. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to start because this is the first professional recording, so I wanted to revisit the first soul school that I did, talking about it from maybe a little bit of a different perspective. So the first thing you want to speak about are creation stories. Is how did things start? The origins of things is so important. Regardless of which West African tradition you look at, they're always looking for the origins of things. How does something start? The Yoruba, they don't start with the beginning of the universe. They don't start with how the angels were born. They start with the angels all existing and the universe existing. And Obatala goes to Oludumare. Oludumare is Olo, means to own, O-L-O. Odu, O-D-U, is the space in which things happen. And Mare is this very special word in Yoruba describing celestial chains, our celestial beads, and they are the strings that connect us all and connect us all to Olodumare. And that's why Olodumare is called Olodumare, because Olodumare is connected by Mare to all things. So all things are part of Oludumare's body. You know, so it's this idea of regardless what fills the space, whether it's the vacuum of empty space, or whether it's the air that we all breathe, or whether it's the ground, the lava, the freshwater river, the lake, the deep sea, whatever medium you're in is filling up Odu, is filling up space. Even the vacuum itself, what we call nothing, is still something that's filling up space. And then you have Mare that move through the space, weave the space all together as one thing, you know? And then you have all the things occurring, well, the medium that fills the space, and then you have all the things that are occurring in that medium. And of course, we all experience everything in the medium of our head. So really, any creation story should start with your own creation. You know, should start with the pot that is your mind, your head, what you've experienced. But the Yoruba, since you can't go to each individual, they went to a place where they felt they could confidently speak about what happened. And the place they went to is that Obatala goes to Olodumare and says, I'd like to visit this planet here. It's all full of water. I love water. Can I visit it? And Olodumare says, yes, I'll give you this magic dust, this magic sawdust, this magic sand, this magic, there's a lot of ways in different stories that it's referred to, but magic particles that you're going to pour onto the earth and create a place where you can dwell. So Batala comes down to earth with this snail shell or gourd filled with these this dust, this powder, and he pours it out, and it pours out and creates a mound, or a pyramid, or a mountain, and this mound, which I like to think of as Pangea, in when there was only one continent, that's this mound, and Obatala, knowing that the earth was all water, was not ready to go and step on the mountain because it may not be able to take his weight. So he takes out either one of two things. Well, let's put it like this. He takes out a rooster, or a chicken in general. The chicken is a five-toed chicken, a magical chicken. A five-toed chicken means that is, of course, related to humanity. We have 5 toes. You know what I'm saying? And he puts the chicken down, and the chicken scratches and scratches at the mound and spreads the mound. This is Ile Ife. Ile Ife means love spreads. The loving gift that Olodumare gave him is spreaded by the chicken and is spread all over the earth and broken up and whatnot, so that there's a large stable space to move on. And then Olodumare puts down the chameleon which is the symbol Obatala puts down the chameleon which is the symbol of Olodumare, because Olodumare is the white light, Obatala, excuse me, I keep saying Olodumare. Obatala is the white light. Obatala literally means Oba means king. Ta means fabric, and La means fabric laid out immaculate, fabric without a spot on it, fabric that no one could question, no one could stain, completely pure white light. because white light is a fabric. It's interwoven photons, all with different frequencies, all coming together as one. And the chameleon represents that issue of the white light being all colors. So therefore, it can be any color. You know what I'm saying? There's a creation story where Obatala was Olodumare, and he fell down, and when he fell down, he became all the other Orisha. He broke up into all the other Orisha. You know, and that's very much the idea of light hidden in a prism. Once again, the mound hidden in a prism and coming out the rainbow. You know what I'm saying? And the rainbow in Yoruba is called Oshumare. It is a Orisha, Oshun, O-S-H-U-N. Mare, again, back to Olodumare. Oshun means the source. Mare is this concept of a spectrum. You know, that's one of the ideas behind these beads it's really a quantum physical description of how energy moves at light speed, where you have frequencies. No energy moves without other frequencies around it. White light is all of the frequencies of visible light all moving as one. Red light is all the frequencies of red light moving as one. You know, and this idea of a spectrum of any type being a type that falls along a spectrum of types. You know, this is a signature of reality. You never have one thing that is completely singular. You always have one thing that is a spectrum of things. And if you keep going long enough along the variety within the one thing, you eventually move to the next thing. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense, we're all connected in this spectrum of reality, you know? So Olodumare could also be translated as the entire spectrum of time and space. Also, you could, there's another way of translating Olodumare where it simply means Olo Lord, good, the good Lord, you know, and you know, good God Almighty, and so the five-toed pigeon or the five-toed chicken has scratched the world, Pangea. You could see chickens are the relations of dinosaurs.
Yes.
So you have Pangea being scratched by the dinosaurs and spread all around the world. And then you have the chameleon set down. The chameleon comes down because Obatala wants to test that the world is strong enough for him to walk on. So the way the chameleon walks, that slow, steady, like it's testing each step, making sure that each branch or each grain or each step he takes is supported by the ground beneath him. And also this idea of cool stepping, this slow motion, to be cool about something, all Obatala stuff. And that's why the chameleon is one of Obatala's animals.
And the snail too.
The snail shell is very important. The Yoruba thought of the secretion of the snail as being a medicine, as being a cooling thing. And snail water was a powerful medicine of Obatala, you know? So the idea that we all came here in a snail shell is very important to Obatala. But any type of vessel, you know, the Yoruba talk about the universe as being held as two gourds being held together by a snake. Now, whenever you hear snake, you hear Oshumare, you hear the spectrum. But this snake is even more than Oshumare. Oshumare is the rainbow of visible light. The serpent that holds together the universe is called Ere and La. Ere means serpent, and La means, like Obatala, means perfectly laid out, just immaculate, beyond, there's not a spot on it, just perfection. Re and La is the serpent of Obatala. And this serpent, the great serpent, is the entire spectrum of energy itself, not just visible light. So yeah, we got pizza coming out.
Oh, all right.
Hold it, no, don't. Jill will be back. Well, yeah. All right. So one thing I want to, and with the Congo, they also talk about a chicken at the beginning of creation, and in this story you have the rooster and the hen. You know, so you have the rooster first coming out doing his funky chicken, and the funky chicken in the African American tradition is very much out of the same as the rumba in the Cuban tradition. It's a Congo retention talking about this chicken dance, which the Yoruba don't do so much of a chicken dance. So it's a very Congo thing, and it's when you see the guy doing like this, that's that shake that birds do when they're trying to get a mate, and then they come at the girl, and the hen's like, no. And that I mean, we're laughing at it, but that kind of energy is the origins of us all, you know? All of our fathers had to do that with all of our mothers. And that's what the Congo are getting at, that this kind of relationship is fundamental to our existence, to all of life's existence, going back to birds and, you know, even fish, to be honest, you know. So, one of the things I wanted to speak about today is the contrast between a culture that believes in the protagonist and the antagonist, believes that you can go against the law of God, that you can commit evil, that you can, that something else is evil that's trying to destroy God or go against God. And I like to think of traditional West and Central African cultures as being pre-Edenic.
Pre-what?
Pre-Edenic, meaning,
yes,
meaning that they were before the fall of Eden. Before the fall of Eden. Before the fall of Eden was the original covenant between God and man. And in the original covenant, God said, eat of everything in the tree of life, for everything in the tree of life is good. And if you eat of the tree of life, you will know goodness and you will not perish. That was the first covenant. Then he said, do not eat of the knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely perish. So in the first covenant, he's saying it's all good. But then he's saying if you eat of the knowledge, well, if you know goodness, it's all good. But if you eat of the knowledge of evil, that you didn't know before. If you eat of the knowledge of evil, you will perish. The knowledge of evil is to know what goes against God, is to know what wrong is to know what is evil, is to know the devil. This is that knowledge. West Africans, when you look at the traditional cultures and you start to study them, there are things that they avoid. There are things that they would rather not have happen. But once they happen, they're considered blessings. Because it would be disrespectful to the immaculate cloth of good God Almighty, to the spreading love of good God Almighty, to the absolute goodness of God, for you to say something actually occurred that was evil, that was wrong, that should not have happened, that went against the will of God. To have that knowledge, you would have to be God. To know something went against the will of God, you would have to be God. So you see in West African culture and in Central African culture, this very deliberate thing where, yeah, we know we don't want this thing to happen, but once it goes down, we have to embrace it as being the goodness of God. You know what I'm saying? And you see this in African American culture with the blues. Yeah, I don't want to be depressed. I don't want depression to come and visit me. But once it walks in the room, hey, old friend, come down, sit down with me and have a drink. You know, let's be melancholy together. Let's celebrate the blues. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, you see it with hip hop. I don't want to get shot. I don't want to shoot nobody. But, yo, if the shooting's going on, then bring it on. You know what I'm saying? This
Don't start now, won't be now.
Yo, for real, but if there's gonna be some, I wish a nigga would. You know what I'm saying? You know? I mean, it's this idea of there is no finger to point at that doesn't point at God. You know, that's why in the gospel church they'll talk about God is good all the time. You know, these are African retentions. This is a pre-Edenic cultural reality where you're like, I don't care what goes on. If it's happening, then I'm going to celebrate it with the glory and the grace of God. If I'm in the flames of hell, I'll be cooking myself some soul food. You know what I'm saying? You know, having a party with it. You know, I think it's one of the reasons why the plantation owners would look at their slaves and say, well, the slaves are happier than us. It must be good that they're enslaved. You know what I'm saying? Not realizing that that was their resistance to hell, by not feeling like they had to go and strap a bomb on their child or crush glass into the master's porridge in order to get good with God because the master was so evil. You know, it is your knowledge of evil that really produces a lot of the antisocial things we all deal with. You know, and that's one of the things that I'm very proud as an African American, how little, you know, we were violent against European supremacy. You know, there's a lot of African Americans out here that celebrate our rebellions and celebrate Nat Turner. I celebrate all those sisters that breastfed all them white babies over their own children. You know what I'm saying? Knowing that their own children could be taken from them and sold downriver by the same master whose children she's breastfeeding, the same master that rapes her, you know? And still, over and over displaying her humanity rather than adopting his inhumanity, trying to seek some sort of justice. You get what I'm saying? You know, that to me is a
long suffering.
It's a horrible suffering, and it's a suffering in which you cannot see a place of justice. It's a suffering where you are born into the suffering, and all the way through it, you see what justice is. You see what justice should be, but you're faced with the reality that the master is constantly having the best of everything, enjoying the best of everything, having the freedoms of everything, and never having the consequences of the inhuman things that they're doing. And at a certain point, I know in my heart, many of these brothers and sisters realized that that was the master's punishment, to lose their humanity. That the master was punishing themselves far more, whipping and lynching and raping, than the people who were being whipped, lynched, and raped.
At what point does justice come into this pantheon?
All right. With the Yoruba, justice is very much about Ochosi. Ochosi is the hunter. He is a similar figure in the Greco-Roman tradition as Cupid, the archer. Ochosi literally means to see is to trap. Once I see you, I've trapped you. Once my eye is a snare, you know, and he's the sharpshooter. He's the one that sits up far away and takes out enemies without the enemy ever seeing what happened, you know. One of the reasons why Ochosi is considered justice in the Yoruba is because of a pataki about Ochosi. Ochosi was the king of his village, and Oshun had given him these beautiful brass bangles. You know, Ochosi is famous for his relationship with Oshun. You know, there are many patakis about the two of them together. And that makes sense because the hunter sets up his hunter's porch on the river, because that way he doesn't have to go off. You know, Ogun the hunter goes off all in the forest looking for, but Ochosi the hunter sits all the time in his perch by a river, knowing that his quarry is going to come to that river, knowing that everyone comes to the source, everyone comes to Oshun, everyone comes to his wife. And when they come to his wife will serve them to him. You know what I'm saying? So you have that relationship with Ochosi, but the pataki I was going to talk about was Ochosi is the king of this village, and he has these beautiful bangles from Oshun, and one day he comes into his hut and the bangles are gone. He's like, oh, there's a problem here, people. He gathers all the village together. He's like, who has my bangles? And nobody steps forward. He's like, listen to me. If you do not produce my bangles, you're going to force me to shoot an arrow up in the air. And believe me, whoever that arrow lies on is the person who took my bangles. And still nobody steps forward. He's like, all right. And he just shoots the arrow up in the air, this concept of blind justice. And the arrow comes down on his mother.
Oh.
They go and check, and yeah, his mother did take the bangles. And that's the issue with blind justice. Yes, you want justice, but what is the cost? You know what I'm saying? What is the cost? You got justice for your brass bangles, but you lost your mother. You get what I'm saying? That's a pataki that I really enjoy, because it shows how close justice is to the belief in evil. You know what I'm saying? When you believe you know someone has to be edited out of reality because God made a mistake with them.
Wouldn't that be revenge versus justice?
She had his bangles. She had a point to step forward. That was justice. He had no idea who he was having. He chose that the person would die, whoever had it.
That's true.
So there's a revenge aspect to that, but what is justice without punishment? So really, there is no way you can talk about justice without talking about revenge. You know what I'm saying? Justice and revenge are almost one. And what's deep is that, like, for instance, with Ogun, he has a pataki where he rapes Yemoja in a fit. And Yemoja, after the rape, shames him and says, how could you treat me, a woman like your mother, in this way? And Ogun says, I am so sorry. I will work endlessly for society for the antisocial things I've done. But that redeems his honor. And not only that, he finds much more enjoyment in serving society rather than violently abusing society. So his punishment actually is not punishment. His punishment is what saves him, is what redeems him, is what makes life more valuable for him.
Transformational justice.
Exactly. You know, there's a difference between reward and punishment and transformation. Reward and punishment says that the person does the right thing because they want to get rewarded, and they're afraid to do the wrong thing because of the pain of punishment. But the fact is that with Ogun will love punishment at a certain point. You know, Ogun is that cat. I wish someone would. You know what I'm saying? Ogun goes all into it. So, and I've seen this with brothers I grew up with. You know, they were like, I want to go to Rikers. You know, I'm not nobody until I go to jail. You know what I'm saying? And that's like a rite of passage. And they come out of jail and feel like, you know, I did something. Like other people feel like they come out of college. You know what I'm saying? There is no punishment that cannot be seen as a reward. And there is no reward that cannot be seen as a punishment. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing about spectrums. You know, if you choose something that's a reward on one side of the spectrum of humanity, on another side of the spectrum of that same humanity, that thing is a punishment. Kurt Cobain killed himself because he felt punished by success. You know what I'm saying? You know? And then on the other side, you have folks killing themselves because they can't stand the hardship of starvation and not having money. You know? So that becomes a punishment. But then you have folks that religiously give up their money, their possessions, and fast, and that is a spiritual reward for them. You get what I'm saying? You have folks that feel that hard labor is the ultimate punishment. And then you have folks paying hundreds of dollars a week to do hard labor at a gym. You know what I'm saying? You know,
something that came to mind is you've broached this subject in other lectures, how there's a lot of similarity between Yoruba and Eastern philosophy. And this reminded me of the parable of the Chinese farmer. Are you
Tell me about that. No, please.
Because you shared that with me. I'm trying to... So, let me see if I remember how it goes. There was a Chinese farmer...
You want me to share it?
Yeah!
Because as I'm listening to you, because my background is Taoism and Zen, and I understand that there could be some relation between Ifa divination and the I Ching, where the hexagrams in the I Ching are 64, and there's a set of 128 in the Ifa, and there's all these other variations. And then when you say things about spectrum, you know, so I think you know where I'm going with some of this. Some of it I would philosophically flush out with you on some of the things that you said. But to your request, as the Chinese farmer, there was in China in the mountains a small farming village, and a poor old farmer who had a horse. He had one horse, and the horse was everything to make that farm work. Without that horse, he was, you know, he was in trouble. And one day the horse ran away. So that's catastrophic. And then all the villagers got together and they commiserated and they said, oh wow, this is terrible, this is the worst thing that can happen, we're so sorry. And his reply was simply, maybe. And then the next day, that horse came back and brought 7 other prized quality horses with it. So now, basically, he's a millionaire in the village. And the villagers come again, and they're like, wow, this is great. You're like rich, you're rolling. This is, the best. And he said, maybe. And then the next day after that, his son, his only son, who helped him work the farm, decided he was going to start breaking in some of these horses. So he took one of the horses and rode it out through the mountains, and the horse threw him, and he broke his leg. His son broke his leg. And then once again, they commiserate because the old man's son helped him run the farm. Without his son, he's in trouble. They say, oh, this is so bad, yada, yada, yada. Your son broke his leg, this is terrible. And the farmer just says, maybe. And then the last part of this, the army, the conscription soldiers came by the farm to conscript all the young men to go to war. And when they came to get his son, they couldn't take him because his leg was broke. Mm. So he said, aren't you really lucky your son's leg is broke? And again, he said, maybe. So this speaks about the idea of being in the pivot of yin-yang, because things are always changing. And depending on your perspective of things, it can be a reward or a punishment, depending on how you orient yourself around what is manifested within the context of where you're at.
Yeah, man, I mean, that's a beautiful story, and it's very much like the Pataki that I'm sharing. And what's interesting is that when I started studying with my godfather, John Mason, who's written many books on Yoruba culture, and I suggested reading The Black Gods by John Mason. One of the first things he said to me is that if you want to understand West and Central African culture and have no understanding of it at all, the most important culture for you to have as a background would be Asian culture. And I can't tell you how true that is.
Thank you.
For instance, you talk about the Dao. The Dao means the way. And that's a legba. A legba is the street, the way, the crossroads. And a legba's signature could very well be a yin and a yang. A legba takes black and white, and when you say your story, it also shows the contrast between a West African and an Asian strategy. The Asian strategy is that pivot, that maybe. The West African strategy is, it's good. Every time it's good. You know, so every time he would be asked, he would say, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. And they would constantly go, well, that blessing wasn't good and that blessing was good. Well, from a West African perspective, I love using African American idioms because they show the retention of these philosophical perspectives. You know what I'm saying? So you have, it's all good. Then you have, well, if it's all good, well, what's really good? You know what I'm saying? you know what I'm saying?
What's really good? And that means good. Don't means good.
Sometimes it's really good.
Ill means good.
Sometimes it's really good to be bad. You know what I'm saying? So you have this idea that there isn't an evil situation. There's just a situation that calls for you to see it in a way that it is good. You know what I'm saying? I wish a nigga would. You know, when you're really not trying to have it. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the power of the idea of the flexibility of being fluid and being like water, which is why water is a symbol of Taoism. It's like depending on how you orient yourself around even the worst of circumstances. And it doesn't mean that you'll escape pain. It doesn't mean that you will escape anger or sadness. You will, if you're human, you should allow yourself to go through the cycles of those emotions. But how you come out of it is how you choose to position yourself with that.
Yeah, SUB, which is another word for a legba. SUB means the force that gathers things into balls.
That's interesting.
You know what I'm saying? The yin yang demonstrates that force of gathering things into balls. You You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Lavoye means, well, let me start from the beginning. Eshu B is often, all the Legbas are often called Eshu Legba. Eshu, like I said, means the force that gathers things into ball, the force that congeals things. Like, it's very similar to the English word issue. It is issues that bring us all together and make us gather into a ball and become one. You know what I'm saying? It's issues that we all stand on. You know what I'm saying? It's issues that make us relate as a singular body. Hey, Hope. So then you have a legba. A legba means the owner of the vital force, the chi. Ache, the force that makes things happen. It's actually, with a legba, it's actually the primal force, because I feel that, like I said, I started creation from Obatala coming to the earth. That's the farthest, the earliest creation story you see amongst the Yoruba. But having known quantum science and looking at scientific models of how the universe and how time and space itself started, you have the primal point, the quantum singularity. That quantum singularity is a ball, a bead that they all talk about, that preceded the Big Bang. This bead, this ball is Eshu. It's Eshu. And this was an Eshu in which all of us were one thing at one time, at one place. All of us, everything we've ever experienced and ourselves were all exactly one pure singularity. Just like when the sperm hit the ovum in your mother's uterus, all of that one cell was where all of your cells for all the rest of your life would come from. You know what I'm saying? So we are made in the image of time and space itself. We are made a singularity. All of life starts off as a singularity. So life itself celebrates the arc that time and space itself took. We're all made in the image of the singularity, and we all experience the singularity. No matter how deep a medium you are, no other soul could replace or be your soul. No matter how close you get with a spirit or an angel, to the point where they're in your body, still you do not experience that angel's experience, and the angel does not experience your experience. We are each singularities, completely one and unique, but within that singularity, all of a creation occurs. I think of this, I call it, the Yoruba call it a legba, I call it the same old soul. This idea that one soul begins in all singularities. And the only difference between your soul and the souls of everything around you is that you have a different origin in time and space. And your specific origin in time and space and the characteristics that you inherited when you were first created, when anything was first created, whether it be an atom, whether it be a molecule, whether it be anything else, that first characteristic of your creation is what takes you through the arc of your whole being until you're not recognizable anymore and can't express yourself anymore within time and space. So the singularity is a legba, eshu. Then you have the next thing that happens, which is ileife, the spreading of that singularity, the explosion. That's chango. Chango is boom, expression, explosion, spreading. As that singularity spread, as it opened, it was without relative. And since it was without relative, time did not really begin yet. Space did not really begin yet. It wasn't until that expansion started to cool down enough that Eshu, once again, could create balls. And these balls that he created were balls of, I mean, I should speak a little bit about what happened before that. As that thing expanded, balls were being created within it. And those balls immediately canceled each other out. Every time Yang was born, Yin was born. Every time matter was born, antimatter was born. And this is another difference between the Yoruba, or even Western Central African culture in general, and Asian culture in general. Asian culture looks to have the yin and the yang be in complete balance. It's very important that there's a balance between yin and yang. Whereas in West African culture, it's very important that there is not a balance. It's very important that something breaks it, that there's a little more of this or there's a little less of that, or the pattern changes a little bit. There's a break. You know, it's on the break beat that everybody loses their mind. You know what I'm saying?
I'd have to challenge you on that.
Oh yeah,
for
please.
The for the Taoist part, they're not looking for complete balance between those two. Because when we do Chinese medicine, I'm a shiatsu practitioner.
Yes.
Each person, each situation, it's really about equity and fluidity in balancing versus balance, because it's not static. It's not like the yin-yang symbol, how it looks very clean and set two-dimensionally. And this is why when I give my lectures, I usually show this symbol as yin-yang, because it's dynamic, it's fluid, it's alive. And you can see, you spoke about the snake that runs in between, you can see the S in the snake. So with the Taoist Asian way, it's like, if you came to me and you were out of balance and I checked you out and I saw how your yin and your yang was, I might give you more yin because you're already very yang, but I give you just enough yin to have you in homeostasis, but not to say, well, I got to make him 50-50 yin and yang. So it's a very...
That's beautiful to know. I always thought it was, they were seeking complete homogeny. I'm very happy that
no, it's not. It's quite individualistic.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
With a shoe, it's the hat off to the side. It's spinning, but it's spinning on a leaned axis. You know what I'm saying? It's
syncopation.
It's syncopation. Exactly. It's walking with that limp.
But I'll say that a lot of people do have that misgiving about it. That's why when I do give my lectures, and I speak, and I just did one at the Strand last week, I break the shit to pieces, because what you're talking about is actually things that can't be said in the final analysis. Because you're talking about apparent duality, but paradoxical unity at the same time. When you're talking about things canceling themselves out, this is why the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching says the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. That's why some Zen koans end in silence, because you can't even say what it is. It's ineffable. So when I do my teaching and give my talks, I purposely break people's concepts and structures around things, because when you do that, then you create death, because you're always looking to control the forces of nature and the forces of spirit. And whenever I go see my Taoist teacher in Chicago, he breaks my shit up. I go in and I think I know some stuff. I think, you know, then I leave crawling, sniveling like a baby. He doesn't give you a leg to stand on.
Well, you know, I mean, I think it's always important to embrace your ignorance.
Yes.
but I also feel it's also important to honor your knowledge by expressing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You know, for instance, with Asian culture, one of the things that are very important in Asian medicine and in West African medicine is the concept of hot and cool. You have hot herbs, you have cool herbs. You know what I'm saying? You have hot chi, you have cool chi. You know, that's also very important. A legba is hot. You know, a legba is either black and white, which is the unknowable, the hot unknowable, because we're always heated about what we don't know. And we're always cooled by what we do, the white, you know what I'm saying? Then you have La Roye, Eshubi is the black and the white, La Roye is the red and the black. All the legbas. La Roye is the owner of rap, the owner of talkativeness. So he's hot to say what he knows. He's hot to express himself. You know what I'm saying? But what he doesn't know is unspeakable. You know what I'm saying? Just like you were saying. My godfather has a saying where he says, they'll tell you about there being secrets in the culture, but what they won't tell you is that a real secret cannot be spoken. You know?
Right.
It just,
Yeah.
you know, that's the nature of a true secret, is that no matter how much you talk, you can't say the secret.
That's also the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching. It says, he who speaks does not know, and who doesn't know does not speak.
Yeah, Chango.
And that leaves you nowhere.
Chango, well, Chango says, those who know do not die like those who do not know. You know, and they'll say, those who know the way to hell do not know the way to heaven. You know what I'm saying? Those who know the way to heaven do not know the way to hell.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So when I say that it leaves you nowhere, I mean it leaves you, it should leave you humble and modest.
It leaves you where you are.
Yeah. And if you're accepting where you're at with humility, then you can be in peace.
There you go.
You can be in hell because you don't understand and you're trying to understand and control all the forces. So then
And that's where the struggle and the friction
and the anxiety comes from.
Exactly.
Reminds me of that line in Do the Right Thing.
Excuse me?
Remember Do the Right Thing? The mayor, those who know don't tell, and those who tell don't know.
That's real time. You know what I'm saying? So you were talking about the I Ching. In Yoruba, we have Odu, which you also are familiar with. Odu is based on a binary code. In fact, Europeans got the binary code they use for computers from the Dogon, who were using that binary code as their sacred mathematics to be able to tell the nature of reality.
So I'm going to have to do some backup on that because Wilhelm Leibniz, who supposedly got binary from a I Ching, but 6 of one, half a dozen of another, they're related. So, and I'm familiar with the Dogon and Sirius A and Sirius B and that polarity.
Well, it wasn't the Sirius A and Sirius B polarity. I'm going to look into that. Everything I've seen says that they got it from magic African numbers, which was out of the Dogon. I've never seen them getting it out of the I Ching. And the only reason why I would question whether it came from the I Ching is because the I Ching isn't working the binary system the way computers work the binary system. Your base number in the I Ching is 64, whereas the base number in Odu is 256. And if you are a computer engineer, 256 is very important on a 16-bit or 8-bit because that's
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely serious overlap because even with the trigrams and the hexagrams, like in the
way they're drawn is the same way.
Right. We do it this way, and the African way is
exactly.
So there's definite
exactly.
overlap.
I mean, it's scary, the overlaps. Like, for instance, in Japanese culture, they talk about Edo being the original people, and the Edo people in West Africa are the people of Benin, which are the people of Ile-Ife, the original people on Earth. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it just goes on and on.
Well, I actually happen to speak Japanese, and there are a lot of African words that are very, very Japanese.
Yes.
Even the spelling, the Romanized version of it, and even the cadence of it is very close to Japanese.
It's scary.
It's really.
It's like,
weird.
how did that happen?
Yeah.
And it's in such a way that you know it isn't through cultural,
right.
It's something, and that's what I mean to get at, is that the same old soul is very real. It's when you have two cultures reflecting so much on each other, that's not a mistake. It's because we are one mind. It is,
absolutely.
And talking about minds, I could talk about the concept of Ori. You have Ori Inu and Ori Ode. O, once again, means to own. Re means sight or perception. The owner of sight, the owner of perceptions. Your head is the owner of your perceptions. What's that basically saying is that your head is the vessel of your universe. Everything that you've ever experienced or could ever experience, you own it. And back to the singularity, you are what you own. No one else can touch it. In fact, the Yoruba say, you just rinse your outer head. You just rinse your body. The only thing you actually own are the perceptions you made with your body. You know what I'm saying? That is what you take with you. That is what no one else can have. Everything else remains with Orisha. It is your perceptions that you own. Your body is, you don't own it. You don't own, you're stewards of everything else that people say you own. Only Orisha own things, because only Orisha do not die. You get what I'm saying? So, the Orisha means the owner of perception chooses. The owner of perception chooses. And what's...
Say Rashomon.
Yes, it's like Rashomon, but also it's talking about the difference between us and the angels. Basically, it's saying, if we could choose, we'd always be here. Nobody would ever want to die. You know what I'm saying? So who's the chosen heads? The heads that don't die. The heads that express themselves through all of us, through all of matter, from the beginning of time till now, and quite well will outlive all of us and all of our children's and children's and children's and children's. They're the chosen heads. They're the chosen stewards of reality. They're the owners of our head. But you will not see the Orisha, you will not see the angels unless you choose to perceive them little by little by little. Cha-cha is this, it's not one choice. Cha-cha is choice after choice after choice. When you're doing the cha-cha with somebody, it's this idea that the person in the front, because they choose to go this way, everyone down the line chooses to go that way. So we are humans because our ancestors chose a very specific path. They chose very specific characteristics that they were attracted to. They chose to use their bodies in a very specific way. And each one of those choices we all followed through till we are all looking like we look. You know what I'm saying? That's the cha-cha. And Oricha is the very field of those choices. Alegba doesn't make choices for you, but Alegba makes all of the choices you have to choose from. You get what I'm saying? And by making all the choices you have to choose from, Alegba already knows what's possible. So
The crossroads.
The crossroads sculpts everything in that sense. But then you have Obatala. Obatala is the potter, Jehovah. Obatala is the white light. What sculpts our perceptions? Light itself. You know what I'm saying?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Going back to singularity and how white represents all of the colors of the spectrum. So I'm curious.
Of the visible spectrum.
Of the visible, yes, thank you. So what role does the color black play? And what does it symbolize? Because I know that in this physical world, all of the colors of the spectrum in light, visible spectrum, turns into white light. But in pigment, you add all the colors and you get black.
All right. Black is one simple thing from a Yoruba perspective. It isn't the absence of anything other than all the things that you can perceive, you can't perceive in the black. Black is the lack of information. Black is ignorance. Olokun, the owner of the deep, they often talk about him as blackness because no one can know what happens at the bottom of the ocean. But that's the interesting thing. Now we have ships that can actually go to the bottom of the ocean and photograph it. And it blew me away because the Edo worship Olokun hard body. And if you look at an Edo altar, you see an all-white altar with white staves sticking up, and all the white staves have little red feathers on top of them. And then when they got down to the bottom of the ocean and shined the light, what they found? All these white creatures that look like staves with little red flurry things. Yo, I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious. And you'll see this over and over again. Chongo, who was the fourth Alafin of the Oyo Empire, he spoke into a gourd that looked like our modern day mics. And he looked like a rap star. He had his hair corn rolled, and he'd speak into the, this is actually a sculpture of him. He'd speak into the gourd, which he's holding the gourd here in my necklace. He speaks into the gourd, and the gourd would multiply his voice so that all the people would gather around him, and he could speak with authority and make things happen. You know, so he was basically doing Jay-Z before, in the 1400s. In the 1400s, and you see things like a legba, this concept of the force that gathers things into balls. Now, in theoretical astrophysics, they say the first thing that happened after antimatter and matter knocked each other out, the first thing that happened was the energy left. Well, even before antimatter and matter knocked itself out, the first thing that happens is balls. You have the singularity, which starts off as a ball. It expresses itself as what they call supersymmetricity, where you have all of these subatomic particles, which are basically balls, waves and balls. So you get, again, the yin-yang wave that expresses itself as a ball. You know what I'm saying? And all of these particles had their exact opposite created exactly when they were created, and they all knock each other out, making undulations. This dance of cancellation makes undulations in the very material of time and space itself. Those undulations continue to expand until all of the antimatter and matter knock each other out, and there's just a little 0.00% of matter left. And that matter, because it wasn't completely balanced, is the only reason why we have time and space at all. If it was completely balanced, if it was completely at peace, all of the energy would have met its soul mate, canceled each other out in peace, and have no reason to exist. We are all made of energy that didn't have anything to cancel it out, that could not be married. We are all made of the leftovers, all made of the desire to meet your peer and live happily ever after in peace. but never are able to because all the pairing has been done.
So it's kind of an asymmetry to the universe.
An extreme asymmetry.
So it kind of shows the perfection of imperfection, which again goes to the concept of duality and non-duality.
Exactly.
And it's also like the urgent urge of when you're making love to someone.
Exactly.
How you're desperately trying to
glad
get
you brought
to
it
the
to sex.
center of this person.
No, I'm dead serious.
Because
sex is the environment of creation.
Because you are scratching and clawing to get to the center. You can't get any deeper than that. But you are trying to get to some kind of center, and they're trying to get to your center, and that's why the yin yang is like two lovers chasing each other, trying to get to that center, and get back to that singularity, and it's a wonderful frustration. And
it is a necessary frustration.
Yeah, and it's like a grain of sand that's just like irritating you. You gotta like, and
that's how the pearl occurs.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? The reason why you have Ile Ife, the very reason why you have Ile Ife is because you have love. And what does love do? It spreads. Why does it spread? Because of desire, because of need, because of want, because it is not at peace that we have existence. Peace is to not exist. It is the need, the want, the desire, the pain. Pain is the environment of creation. Yemoja is the owner of this pain. Iya, like we said last week, mother in Yoruba means the owner of pain, because pain is the necessary sacrifice that has to be made in order for creation to continue creating, you know? And I hate to say creation, because the fact is that since that singularity, there's been nothing created. In fact, the only thing that happened is 99.9% of everything ceased to be. 99.9% of everything found peace immediately. What continues is that without peace, and it cannot be added to, and it cannot be taken away from. It is an eternal need, an eternal desire that we are all made of. And the only reason why we see creation as being a place in which things are created is because the need of the very energy we're made of pushes it to express itself always in a new way, always at a new scale, always with new characteristics, by breeding all of the characteristics that existed before. Constantly finding new characteristics. And this is, you can see this in the story of the early universe. After supersymmetricity, and after all of the baryons, the small particles that make up everything, after they all cancel themselves out, Alegba takes these quarks. Now, Eshu means to gather things into ball. The other characteristic of Alegba is that he multiplies by 3. That's his signature characteristic. He multiplies by 3. And it takes 3 quarks to make a proton and a neutron. 3 quarks. All things are made of protons and neutrons, and all of them are made of 3 quarks. They're very Alegba names for these quarks: an up quark, a down quark, a right spin quark, a left spin quark. Alegba is always spinning, and he's always up and down. That's Alegba. Alegba is the youngest and the oldest. Alegba is on either side of any spectrum. So these quarks are, as the universe cools, these quarks come together in the strongest force that's expressed in time and space, which is the strong nuclear force. The strong nuclear force is true love itself. A love so powerful that it will bind particles that absolutely repulse by each other. And that's the truest love, is when you are bound to something you're repulsed by. You know, that's that Alegba love, that street love. You know, that's when the thug and the lawyer end up having an affair. You know what I'm saying? You know? It does. It shouldn't. They should be repulsed, but bam. You know what I'm saying?
One time I saw a Hasidic Jew and a Muslim woman making out in Midtown. True story. It goes down.
So these quarks combine together into protons and neutrons, and then the universe cools enough where something dramatic happens. The primal energy, which again is a soup except for these particles that are in the soup but still haven't congealed enough that there's any such thing as real time or space. What suddenly happens is that primal energy cracks, and you have two Orisha that are born. Well, three Orisha that are born. Alegba was the singularity, Chango was the expanse of that singularity, but then Chango is reborn as the flow of electricity. Electricity and photons, electrons and photons were once one energy together. The electrons and photons are pulled apart, and you get the first expression, the first photograph, the first record that we all can see today. And that record is the birth of Obatala, the birth of streaming photons. And we can see it today when you turn on your TV and you get white noise, or when you turn on your radio and you hear static. That is the birth of Obatala. And before you ask me about blackness, the Yoruba didn't know that Obatala existed in the dark. But the first expression of Obatala is called microwave radiation. You cannot see microwave radiation, but it is light. And that's what I mean by black just being ignorance. And that's why I look at the Yoruba with so much respect, because they didn't want to talk about stuff they were ignorant about. That's why they started off knowing Obatala already existed, so we know that much, and we know Obatala had to come to Earth, and we know that much, and we know about, so they started with what they knew. But now we know more. Our observation of nature has given us a window into a deeper understanding of where the origins of things come from. You know what I'm saying? So now we can actually look and see the point at which let there be light happened. And
I was just going to say, and it's interesting that in the Taoist perspective, the not knowing and the ignorance is never negative. It's just a state of being. It's just what it is. And the other thing that blackness does to white light is it gives a contrast to be seen, because if it's all white light, you can't see it. Exactly. Everything is white, so you need the contrast.
Yes.
And just like the farmer, it's always going to change, and it's always going to be different, and maybe, and maybe, and maybe. But the beginning part is the acceptance of the ground of the existence of that energy. And that microwave, you know, that original background noise is still there.
It's still there. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing to think about, these photons. Thinking about it from an angelic point of view is very important to me. Thinking about it from the Orisha's point of view is very important to me. An electron, the same electrons that were ripped out and started going around the protons and neutrons and creating Ogun. Ogun is the electron shell that makes it so that we can bang something. Because when we bang something, it has nothing to do with protons and neutrons, has nothing to do with the strong magnetic force. It's all just the electromagnetic force. It is literally a magnetic force field that is keeping my hand banging on this, and that same magnetic force field is what generates the wave that moves through the air, that reverberates on your eardrum, all through force fields. because you can't describe them as being solid. An electron cloud is an electron the size of a fly, and a nucleus, it's not a nucleus, geez, messing with my scales. I did say it right, nucleus, right? I forget, whatever, the center of the atom. The center of the atom is a basketball 3 miles away from the fly. And yet, you have these basketballs coming at each other, and before they ever touch each other, the two flies stop them from touching. 3 miles. And no matter what comes at it, they stop. That's not solid. That's some sort of force field voodoo shit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a fly shouldn't be able to do that, you know, but that's what happens. And really what is really going on is that it's crystallized speed, crystallized light. Light moves at the speed of light. And the reason why those two flies can always bang off of each other is because they're moving at the speed of light around the nucleus. When you have something going like this really, really quickly, it starts to have its own mass, its own orientation. Strange things start to happen. Each one of the atoms in our body, each one of the atoms that we breathe, all these atoms have energy moving light speed around it in this crystallized power, you know? E equals mc squared means that everything is energy. Mass is energy, but what's really important is the amount of energy it is. You know, if I were to take my body and somehow be able to release all of the light speed particles that are in my body, that are being bound to being in one place by just moving around really quickly in the same space. If I were to release all of that so that they could move in whatever direction they wanted, not only would I be in trouble, this world would be in trouble. I have enough mass that I would definitely break the world. You know what I'm saying? When you blow up a nuclear weapon,
right, one atom, right?
It's not even one atom. It's a very small amount of mass that's being translated into energy. Like a hydrogen bomb, which is a big, big bomb, but most of the energy is being made into helium. Most of the energy, most of the mass of the hydrogen that's being fused together to make helium, in a nuclear bomb, the uranium has a chain reaction, splitting the nucleuses. And only a small part of that uranium actually gets translated directly into energy. You see, E equals mc squared means that your mass, say, you know, 150 pounds, 160 pounds, your mass times the speed of light. Now, the speed of light is a big number. Times the speed of light squared. That's how much energy exists in your mass. You know what I'm saying? We are beings of animated energy with powers so beyond our understanding, but blessed by having it all in this tender, intimate, soft expression. But actually, we're stars. You know what I'm saying? We're stars made of the stuff of stars. You know? So you have the first atoms that occur. The electrons start going around the nucleuses, and the electromagnetic background radiation is expressed, the microwave radiation that, again, these photons, when you get static on your TV, what you're watching is a photon that has been untouched untouched for 14 billion years. It's been traveling through space, this photon. And then suddenly it touches an antenna and is absorbed by the electron and dies.
What?
And you're watching billions of them anytime you're watching static on your own thing. Billions of photons that have been traveling space for billions of years. Suddenly, boom, absorbed into the electron, done. You know what I'm saying? And the electron it's absorbed into also has been around for billions of years. And there's nothing that absorbs the electrons. Electrons spit out brand new photons anytime you heat them up. It's easy to create and destroy a photon.
That's what a light bulb is.
Yep. My skin is dark because I am eating up all of the white light. The electrons are just absorbing the light. You're lighter skinned to me because you let more of the, photons. You are letting more of the photons free. From a photon's perspective, if I were a photon, I would much rather hit you than me. Think about that. Obatala, Jehovah said, I am the light. Let there be light. It's looking at reality from the perspective of light. If you're looking at reality from the perspective of light, black is not a cool thing. Black is what completely absorbs your whole spectrum. You'd much rather hit something light than something black. Inherently, Obatala is racist. Inherently. Inherently, Obatala wants to be clean, wants to be white, wants to be without a mark. Even though that's gossamer, even though it could end at any moment. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Alegba don't give a fuck. Darkness doesn't give a fuck. It is what it is. I've been here for 14 billion years, I'm gonna be here for 14 billion years. Whether I am an electron caught around an atom, or whether I'm free and flowing as electricity. Been here 14 billion years, gonna be here 14 billion years. The only thing that can really fuck with an electron is if it gets so hot that the electron becomes free energy. You might say that in that situation, the electron dies, but I don't think it even dies then. You have to ask a physicist about that.
But isn't the electron also the wavicle where it depends on whether it's being observed or not?
Oh.
That determines whether it's going to be a wave or a particle?
That's light, but light, all right, all quantum particles, I believe, have a collapse of the wave into a particle. I know the split, the double split experiment.
Yeah.
That experiment is with a photon, and a photon. You see, an electron actually has mass. A photon has no mass.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So an electron creates friction with all the electrons as it's moving through anything. If it's moving through the air, it's looking for the path of least resistance. That's why when you see electricity flowing through the air, it isn't like a ray of sunshine.
Right.
A ray of sunshine can move right through the air, straight, no doubt. But a ray of electrons has to kind of search for it's looking just like us going through a forest. We don't go through a straight line. We take the path of least resistance, the zigzag path. You know what I'm saying? The path that is easiest for us to take. You know, and we get that characteristic from electrons. And LA, like I keep saying, issues mean issues, like issue, electrons, electric. It is, I call it soul selectric. It is this electric of electrons that most reflects life. Life, we are very much electrons being expressed on the scale we exist in, rather than on the quantum scale. You know what I'm saying? You know, and as you start to study these characteristics that reverberate in all of nature, you start to see how they express themselves in different scales. Right now I'm starting from astrophysics, but you can see how they express themselves in biology, you can see how they express themselves in chemistry, you can see, because they always have the same characteristics. A Legba is always 3, Chongo's always blowing up shit, are flowing through things, trying to find the path of least resistance. Oshun is always flowing, Yemoja is always waving, you know, sifting, looking through her soul. You know, she's a soul searcher. You know what I'm saying? These characteristics happen from your dreams, through every fantasy and story you've ever read, through every observation of nature, which is science. You know what I'm saying? And you can also see them in every culture. You know what I'm saying? In Chinese culture, you see the Orisha. You see a Legba is the Tao. You see Oshun, whose colors are red and yellow, as the idea of prosperity and civilization. You know what I'm saying? You see, I mean, basically, any culture you study, you start to recognize the same angels. It's just, you also start to recognize that those angels made different contracts with different cultures.
But why, at what point, I mean, you're talking about origins, why is it Obatala, the king? Why is he favored? Why is the light, the whiteness,
Remember, it was a crucial point. The earliest record that you can actually see, is white noise. The Bible begins with, let there be light. And this is crucial. Obatala is always king. When Europeans arrived in Africa, Africans saw Obatala. When Europeans arrived to the Aztecs and the Mayans, they saw Quetzalcoatl. Again, a Re and La, the feathered serpent that is all white, a white-faced man. And the Aztecs and the Mayans went so far as he was wearing glasses. He's an old white man, like Benjamin Franklin. I'm dead serious. They depict Quetzalcoatl wearing rimmed glasses, round glasses. You know what I'm saying? We are of one mind, but we are also of one time. There's only one thing going on here. So therefore, everything that's operating knows everything that's going to happen and knows everything that has happened. And knows its contract to do what must happen in the present. Time and space is a precision machine. In order for you to be here, your great-great-great-great-grandparents and every parent in between had to do exactly what they did. And not only did they have to do exactly what they did, every sperm and ovum between them had to do. So on a single cell level, there had to be exact actions that happened at exact moments, or else you wouldn't be who you are. That kind of precision can only happen because it already happened. That means that as much as you feel you're free, as much as you feel you're doing what you want to be doing, you're just like the insulin and the sugar in our body, moving freely, haphazardly. It looks chaotic, nothing's in control. And yet, exacting balances are occurring, or else you would be sick. You know what I'm saying? You know, that kind of precision should give you the confidence to do what you do. But what's beautiful about that kind of precision is that your insecurity is absolutely necessary for that kind of precision. You know what I'm saying? It does what it does, you know? If you're a hypochondriac, fearful, paranoid, schizophrenic yelling on the corner, you are fulfilling God's will and are just as important as Donald Trump up in the White House.
Sorry.
And your repulsion of Donald Trump is just as important as somebody else's embrace of Donald Trump. You cannot avoid perfection. This is a precision machine, and I call it perfection not as an issue of judgment. I call it perfection because it's impossible to make a mistake. It is what it is. If it were possible to make a mistake, what the fuck am I doing here then? If it were possible to make a mistake, then everything has to be a mistake. Because it's too precise. You know what I'm saying? It's so precise, you've got to see it as a singularity. I really can't see any other way of seeing it. It's the only way things can work out to generate the experience we all experience. Is that everything is working together all the time. I mean, look at us. Look at how frail we are. How easy it is to disrupt any one of us in this room. And yet, for 4 billion years, from single cells, as delicate as they are, I mean, I'm killing single cells right now. You know, from single cells 4 billion years ago to not only be uninterrupted, but have so much fun that they could create all of the diversity of life that we see today. I mean, you know how violent this world is? You know how easy it is to sterilize things? This world could have been sterilized at any time, and still could be. I mean, it ain't like it's over, you know? Easily sterilize this world. And yet, there has not been a major break. Yeah, there's been a few extinctions, but what is an extinction? It's a trimming of the tree of life. That's all it is. Tree of life has been, an extinction would be cut the trunk. You know what I'm saying? You know? And it still can happen because unfortunately, we are still a singularity. We're still in the trunk, which is the gravity pit of Earth. You know what I'm saying? We're still very much, all of life as we know it, one thing. We still haven't spread. You know what I'm saying? So until we start spreading to other Earths, sterilization is a very real possibility, even by our own hand.
Right.
You know?
It's very fascinating to me also how, when you bring up how Yoruba philosophy has interesting dovetail with science. And it's like how some people are more art-minded, some people are more scientific-minded, but you really can't say that one is more valid than the other.
It's like Spanish or French or Mandarin, or, you know, it's just different languages.
It's just different.
It's talking about the same thing.
And it feels, I've always said and felt like they really require each other. The job of the artist is to translate science to the masses that don't have a intimate relationship with art or science. And it feels a lot like Yoruba philosophy kind of does that.
Well, it's interesting, you were talking about the emotions too. That's one thing that this language of science kind of lacks, that the Yoruba doesn't.
Yeah, in my personal experience, there is no knowledge that Orisha doesn't decode. You know, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, I got pulled aside by 5%ers who put us all in cipher and said, fuck that mysterious God. You're God. Tell me what God is. Now, I don't want to hear no mystery. And that set me on a road to basically the mystery of God. In Yoruba, there's a priest that's called Babalawo. It means the father of the mystery. So the Yoruba also were in pursuit of that mysterious God. For me, the Orisha are a powerful tool in understanding the mysterious God. And so is the Nganga of the Congo. I mean, don't get me wrong, Christianity does attempt to understand the mysterious God. Science does attempt to understand the mysterious God, and without those two understandings, my understanding of Yoruba wouldn't be as deep as it is. And of course, Asian culture, Taoism, Zen, Buddhism, Mesoamerican culture, you know, Quetzalcoatl, the girl with the golden bells. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting with Taoist thought because they really don't have a term or word for God. There's no personification of a deity. And the first translations of the Bible from Matteo Ricci, the Jesuit who first went there, translating the Tao Te Ching, put the word God in there for Tao, and they're not equal translations of each other. So when thinking of the first cause, it's like heaven's will, heaven ordained, heaven yada yada yada, but it's never a personified deity or person.
Well, in Judaism, they also strongly resist giving a name to the Most High. And they definitely don't like to write it down. But Romanized Christianity wanted to find a name for God. It's interesting that we use words like God. God is a German word. It comes out of the Norse tradition. And again, like I'm going to go into with English, and Yoruba is an oral language. All languages started off as oral. They didn't become written until sometime later. What's interesting though is that when you write a word, you are able to make distinctions where there are no distinctions. The word God and the word got are really the same word. It's because they use the D in God and the T in got that we see them as being so different. But if you were not writing it down and never had seen it written down, and somebody says, you got, you might hear you got, like the Wu-Tang member. You know what I'm saying? Rather than you got. You know what I'm saying? I got. You might hear I'm God.
I was just listening to Africa Mabata track, and he says, I want to reach it.
Well,
I want to reach it.
To me, God is about ownership. And the Yoruba, they have a word for God, Olodumare, but there's no altars for Olodumare. There's no prayers for Olodumare. There's no dances for Olodumare, because they consider Olodumare to be so far away from us, he isn't even worried about us. And so deep and so powerful that there's no reason to call out to Olodumare, because it is what it is and it's going to do what it does. You know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
The only reason why you call out to somebody is because you want to offer them the chance to do what you want them to do. Because you know there's a chance that they're going to do something you don't want to do.
Right, there's no, what you call it, Pataki, there's no Pataki for Adulamari.
Huh?
There's no Pataki for Adulamari.
Olodumare does take place in Pataki, but Olodumare does not interact with human beings in Pataki. Olodumare interacts with the angels, you know? There's a yep.
We have to break out.
Oh, nice meeting you, brother. I hope you come back again, man.
Yeah, I will.
I love the contrast between the Asian culture and the African culture. You're really well versed in Asian culture.
Thank you. And I've been wanting to get the West African knowledge that I don't have, because I know that it's valid and it's powerful, and it does mesh with the Taoist philosophies as well. So
I was excited to bring you all for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Thank y'all. No,
Yeah.
thank y'all.
And thank
Sorry we
you
have to
for-
break out.
Good to see you, Dragonfly.
Girl, it's really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Meeting with Mayfield today.
Oh, nice.
Such a small world. I really super fond of this space. So thank you for what you're doing. And
Yay,
doing
Jill.
this.
Yay,
Yay. Yeah, and you know, you said to reach out anytime, so I definitely will. I really appreciate your ciphers so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
So this is every
A rich part of the cipher.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not
Thank you.
I'm not
And you
sure
brought
how
another
long,
rich
but
part.
For a while now, right?
It's beautiful what
A
you do.
cipher is only as deep as the people in it.
That's true.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, this is exactly what I moved to New York City for, to just be a part of a big old cipher. Yeah. I love New York City, and she loves me back, and this is a part of that experience.
That's real talk.
Yeah, and that's the energy I came here with, and that's what gets reflected back to me.
Yo, these streets are real, man.
They are. I talk to these streets, and they're like, "What's good, Dragonfly?" Word. Thank you.
The streets are watching and talking.
Oh.
How are other folks feeling, y'all? Y'all want to wrap it up?
Thank you.
What time is it?
It is 10 to 9.
You want to wrap it up, or you want to go for 10 o'clock?
But we have pizza.
At least 9.
We have pizza.
If we're gonna go another 10 or so, I'm cool. But if we're gonna go another hour, I'm cool. But I just need a bathroom break.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a good time.
Go ahead to the bathroom. I'm
Yeah?
not going to, we can take a second out some pizza.
All right, cool. I'm gonna. Okay, so don't say anything too interesting. I'm gonna turn out of this for a second.
Cool.
And I stick to this word international performance art because we can communicate with each other all over. It doesn't matter what language you're speaking.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, because you come to a lot of the performance art.
Yeah. And this idea of an action, like for instance, found object, found action, this idea of making something that is mundane into a spectacle was very, very central to West and Central African art. And Europeans, when they first saw West and Central African art, didn't understand why a spoon that everybody in the village has, but then there's this other spoon here that everybody in the village is bowing to and is all important. What's the difference, you know? Why is this Campbell soup can so important when there's commercials of it all over? You know, why is this urinal so important when there's, these are things that, for instance, the Western European academic mind so misunderstood it that you get a brand new concept, which is the idea of a fetish, which was, you know, Freud saying, oh, these Africans are so fixated on sexuality that's the reason why they have these mundane symbols and they treat them with such divinity. You know what I'm saying? That's the reason why they worship a spoon, because
Yeah, but fetishes are something else.
no fetishes.
But I mean, there's a sexual fetish, but
The whole concept of fetish
Right.
is based on West Africa. It's a critique. It's a psychoanalytical
Right.
critique of West and Central African art,
right.
and that psychological critique became what we call a sexual fetish about shoes. But it started off as the fetishes that that West and Central African art was making.
Right.
Basically, in the 19th century, Europeans recognized all around the world that their art was different than everybody else's art, and that there was more similarity between West African art and Aboriginal art, Australian art, and Native art and Asian art than there was to European art. and that the only people that that had a similarity to European artists were Egyptian. You know, and that's of course because Egypt was very influential on Europe's art. So their argument was that Europe is the supreme expression of the advanced, modern, fully developed man. And all the other people were on their way to try to become advanced and modern, but like a child had not yet learned the skills necessary to become advanced modern artists. You know? This should be on the tape, but...
Oh yeah, you were supposed to not say anything important.
Cool.
I already started it again. We're good.
So amongst the academics, like Freud, they studied African art to try to find out why Africans were incapable of expressing themselves as civilized, modern people who could paint naturalistically in perspectival space. They felt that that was the epitome of human expression, which is hilarious to me, because now there are so few artists that work out of the European classical tradition, any European classical tradition. So few artists are deeply influenced by ballet, so few artists are deeply influenced by classical symphony, so few artists are deeply influenced by rendering naturalistically in perspectival space like Renaissance art. These are not the things that influence modern art today. Modern art today is completely influenced by Western Central African dance, isolations and gyrations, which were considered to be sensual fixations of the primitive mind. They are completely dominated by syncopated rhythms, which is considered to be the primal expression of the unorganized sexual pathology of these primitive people who have yet to have civilized and developed metered music. You get what I'm saying? So all of these deep, horrible criticisms of Western Central African culture that are actually woven into our language today, where I say fetish and nobody even thinks of Africa. They just think of some sexual issue, some sexual pervert. But that's what they were calling the whole of Western Central Africa. Perverted, sexually dominated, primitive people that are completely at the whim of their most base expression of humanity and have yet to do the work or have the education to understand the true expression of a modern human being, of a civilized human being. While their artists at the very same time were adopting hand over fist all of these Western Central African cultural expressions and taking full authorship of them without looking at Western Central African cultural concepts, instead framing it all within their European. So now we go to art school to learn Western Central African ideas and motifs like performance art and taking an action. This in Yoruba is called chere. Chere means to do game. That's what performance artists are doing. They're doing game. What that means is to be able to take an action, and through that action, through the symbolism of that action, make a criticism about the society you're in. It has a name in West Africa. It has a whole conceptual history in West Africa. But Europeans make up their own history for it, and then teach their own history for it without acknowledging the centuries-old tradition that it came from. You know what I'm saying? Huh? Chere. Chere, which means to do game. You use game, because again, how do you prove to someone that's right and that's wrong when you don't have the will of God behind you, like Europeans did? You know, Europeans could go around, you people are evil, primitive people, and I have to enslave you and civilize you because of God. Western Central Africans couldn't take that step with their society. They couldn't say, God told me you're evil and you got to stop doing that. Instead, they had to find artistic ways of swaying someone's ideas so that they would turn against more antisocial behavior. You couldn't say you're evil for sacrificing people all the time and kill them and think that was going to stop the evil, because then their brother and their sister just sacrifice you. So you had to come up with an artistic way, an artistic argument that swayed their soul so deeply that they just decided to stop making sacrifices of people. And you see this all through the pataki. The pataki are all expressions of actions, expressions of action art, expressions of performance art, and how that art was used to sway the morality, to sway the actions of society. You get what I'm saying? So here we go to art school, and in our first year we learn about Auber's color. Auber's color has nothing to do with the European tradition of color. We learn about Bauhaus. Bauhaus aesthetics has nothing to do with the European tradition. We learn about all of these deep, profound, modern concepts from a European perspective that just learned about it last century, when they're based on African concepts and ideas that go back thousands of years. That's why I have a class like this. Because artists don't, these liberal artists that are all fighting against European supremacy don't recognize their whole education is so dominated by a European supremacist outlook that they might as well be modern-day slave masters compared to a grandchild of theirs that will really understand West African art and its history and understand how stupid white artists look talking about taking an action and changing culture without knowing concepts like charity. You know what I'm saying? You know? You know, because, I mean, it's tragic. It's a real tragedy. I went through Cooper Union and Yale, and nobody ever sat in a room and told me that everything I was learning at Cooper and Yale was based on African culture and not European culture. I never was in a class where, at both schools, never was in a class where I had to learn anatomy like Michelangelo. I was never in a class where I had to learn to dance like the ballet. You know what I'm saying? I was never in a class where I had to learn to do theater like Shakespeare. All of my classes were classes that were based on Western Central African ideas of art, using Western Central African strategies.
When you got to Yale?
No, at Cooper too.
At Cooper.
Yeah. When you get to Cooper, you already have to have learned from the masters and done all that European shit, or else they would never let you in the school. Once you get in the school, they take apart all that stuff with African culture, but they never call it African. They just talk about Picasso and Duchamp, and you know what I'm saying? As if these ideas suddenly express themselves in European culture all independently on their own, and there's no other culture you have to learn about these ideas other than the European artists that originated them.
So dirty.
While they teach you that modern art, they also give you a class on the primitive art on the side.
Yeah, that's how I was with school. Like I took one class on Western African art, and it was very like anthropological. And,
yeah, it's primitive art. You can never understand these people. These people, they're not even really humans. There's some other people that were so uncivilized, so far out of your experience, that they have nothing to offer you other than to show you the diversity of man.
Yeah, or it's very like...
Even though everything you're studying in the school directly comes out of the primitive art. Their whole modern aesthetic. And they know it, they'll say it to you, but they don't know the West African concepts behind it. They never mention the Oyo Empire. You come out of art school and you know more about Wakanda and Tarzan than you do about Chongo and Ogun. You know what I'm saying? And I don't care what color your skin is. Knowledge is knowledge. If you are using it and going to use it for a lifetime of profession, you should at least know its origins and at least know the concepts that generated it before Europeans framed it the way they framed it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
Look who we got here.
Hey, Rosie.
Courtney, were you gonna say something else?
Oh no, I was bringing like I took one class like in West African art. Like it was just offered one semester, and the professor, she was fighting to just stay there and teach that class. Like they were trying to get rid of it, and it was like, you know, like she's a white woman, and she also didn't really get deep into the concepts. It was like, oh, look at these cool things they made. Look how different their art is. And look at, like, it was like marveling at the simplicity of these people and the way they create, instead of having like a really deep understanding of the concepts that you're talking about and actually being able to express that. So even her own education and understanding of like the art like wasn't really explained, you know. And so I left the class wanting to know more, but still ultimately through a whole semester still leaving it feeling fairly empty in terms of like what I had learned or understood, you know. Or like most classes, like the only time you do hear of Black or African artists is if they're like sprinkled in like modern artists, like, oh, look at, you know, Kehinde Wiley doing his thing now, like, and that's because they're popular. But as far as the people who like thought leaders in art, none of them are Black.
I have to interrupt you. Kehinde's my boy,
Yeah.
but I get so upset about his work because he goes and puts hip hop as if it came out of the Renaissance, which is the same as taking found art and saying Marcel Duchamp invented it. Europeans feel so much more comfortable when they are the origin of stuff.
I just wanted to say something that now I don't know if I'm speaking out of line.
Never. Speak up.
The thing about the performance art, and maybe thinking of going to school to try to understand it as from the linguistic side as opposed to the art world side, because like what you're saying, the art history that they gave me isn't explaining it. There's something missing. It didn't just erupt out of the world in the 1950s and got really popular in the 60s. It came from somewhere. And then there's things about it came from ritual. For some reason, ritual is making more sense to me now, but there also seemed to be like a slightly, there's something not totally connected. So I can't find anything else. So, but what you're saying sounds like, if you look at this richer history coming from Central Africa through time, it makes more sense. Does that make sense?
It's a different contract than the classical European contract. The classical European contract was completely based on the knowledge of evil. They felt certain things were evil, so they didn't study certain things. They felt certain things were good, so that's what they studied. And not only that, when they found something, like for instance Galileo finding that the earth was not the center of the universe, they refused it. Because they were so politically invested in wrong knowledge that they were unwilling to let go of that wrong knowledge and would persecute people who were just trying to express knowledge that actually reflected the nature of reality. That's the reason why they so actively rejected African culture, because they saw it as a threat. You know, Theodore Roosevelt, when he was running for president, said, "I will prevent the Brazilianization of the United States." He said that because in Brazil, young white European Portuguese were getting initiated into African religion. And from his perspective, the idea of a European person embracing African religion was the greatest evil that he could think of. It was a horrible idea. The reason why Elvis Presley was not shot from the waist down on the show was because he was doing Congolese dance vibrations. They grew up with us. The South knew Congolese dance from the first slave. They knew the dance of Oshun. They knew isolations and gyrations. That's what black people do. And it's evil and it's wrong. So basically what has happened is just like with Galileo, Just like with science, African culture has been violently abused, held captive, thrown back, even though it much more related to the nature of reality and much more reflected the human condition. But Europeans' political and very sense of value depended on them living the lie, of them pushing away the truth, of them resisting their own humanity in order to be better than human. And that's what happens when people are concerned about making things better. I get real cautious about people who are telling me what's better, because what they're saying to me is, I'm God and I know what shouldn't be. And that is the European trap. That's Obatal's trap. Obatal's argument, Obatala is the white man. All around the earth, we all knew, you know, the Native Americans talk about the great white father in the clouds. Yoruba talk about the white cloth with it. Everyone knows Obatala. Every people around the world know Obatala. The Incans would take 9-year-old children up into the mountains who had never had a mark on their body and sacrifice them to Obatala. You know, Obatala don't like people. Obatala don't like the truth. Because the truth is that Obatala never gets to be matter. We are matter. We absorb Obatala. We are Alegba. Overwhelmingly. And Obatala don't like us. That's why the Gnostics said that Christ was not the son of Jehovah. Christ was the son of the crossroads. That's why he died on the crossroads. That's why he died on the cross. That's why he was born. That's why he starts off homeless bum and rises to become Lord of Lords. These are all signatures of Alegba, what Europeans defined as the devil. But Europeans made it very clear what they do with Alegba culture. They went all around the world and said, yeah, we had the son of Alegba. We lynched the motherfucker. Fuck with us. And that's what they did. They went all around the world showing this cross and telling everybody they better be Obatalas. Because we outlaw Alegba's characteristics. No getting drunk on the corner. No walking around with a limp and thinking you're cool. You better be sick. You know? And no, never a bum, never a homeless man, never a slave to ever rise to become king. Those are all Obatala's arguments, all Obatala's rules. I love Obatala. Obatala is a beautiful angel. But Obatala gets drunk off of power, just like he gets drunk off of alcohol. When he gets drunk off of alcohol, Obatala, the potter, misculpts children. He misculpts them. He makes dwarves and gigantism and albinos and mongoloid kids and birth defects. Where those are all the blessings of Obatala. Those are all Obatala's special children. Europeans are Obatala's children. African Americans are Alegba's chosen children. All of the racism that we all exist in have nothing to do with any one of us as individuals. It has to do with an argument that goes back 14 billion years between light and matter. And light always wins. Why does light win? Because matter knows it doesn't matter. Sooner or later, Ogun comes around and reveals the truth. And then the bum, the slave, the homeless man, the sexually deviant, the limping, then everybody recognizes, oh, that's the Lord of Lords. You know? It's like that. You know? You know, I mean, sooner or later one day, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King will be celebrated just like Christ. Instead of the crossroads, they'll be celebrated through Ogun, the gun. But nonetheless, we're still killing the Legba. Malcolm X, the Legba, you know? We're still upset with the crossroads. We still want to call him a trickster, even though all he says is the fucking truth. And we're tricking ourselves because we keep believing in Obatala's arguments. You know what I'm saying? The Jewish felt, after they fell from Eden, when they ate of the tree of the knowledge of evil, they felt they were the chosen heads. They called themselves the chosen ones. The Yoruba recognized that the chosen ones were the angels. Because we keep coming generation after generation and keep going. It's just the angels that persist. And their angelic arguments sculpt everything we experience. And believe me, you name the social argument, you name the law that someone made, and I'll show you the angel that they're trying to control. And I'll show you which angel is the one that's trying to control that angel. And for the most part, it is a cool angel like Obatala trying to control a hot angel like a Legba. It's some cat complaining about their quality of life while they choke out the next cat so they can't live at all. You get what I'm saying? Over some angelic arguments that ain't got shit to do with our day-to-day. You know? Thinking you can prevent a Legba. Thinking you can stop alcoholism by making a law against alcohol. And Ogun ain't gonna come around and Chongo ain't gonna come around and blow shit the fuck up. You know? You think you can make a law outlawing an herb, outlawing the tree of life. Make a law that outlaws the original law that all of the tree of life is good. You make a law outlawing the tree, and you think there's not going to be ramifications? You know? People will die over laws like that. You know? But nonetheless, Obatala comes around. Oh, it'll make it better if people don't smoke reefer. Look at your brain on drugs. Obatala arguments. Head arguments. You know what I'm saying? If you know a Legba, you know. Can't get better, can't get worse. It is what it is. I'm going to be what I'm going to be. And no law is going to stop me. You can't outlaw my characteristics because my characteristics cannot be controlled. I am existence itself, and I will rule, even though you call me a slave. You know what I'm saying? Even though you say I'm homeless. Yeah, I guess on that note, I could chill out. I was kidding. Thank you, guys.
That was dope. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice rap.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, when I was a kid, like, you know, I grew up Baptist, and I used to always think about, like, you know, Jesus turning the water into wine. He could walk through walls. He could do all these really magical things. And they would say, you can do everything that, you know, Jesus said you can do everything that he could do. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, so one day I could walk through walls. Or, like, you know, he connected with everybody, with the prostitutes and, like, you know, the homeless and everything. Like, he was a person of the community. But then anytime you would display any of those characteristics, it would be like, oh, like if I told my parents that I was gonna try and walk through a wall, they would first of all laugh, or like get really scared and think that I was trying to do some black magic. But I'm like, no, Jesus just said I can do that. He did it. I should be able to do it. But it's like that sanitation process, like you said, well, Batala and that cleanliness once. Like they took Jesus and then like sanitized him and then like took control of the narrative, and just enough of his story is told just to kind of like...
You see, what's really important to me is that you understand my argument is that they took Jesus. Mm-hmm. That's not my argument. Mm-hmm. My argument is that Obatala had an issue with Jesus.
Right.
And he expressed that issue through the people that were there.
Right.
You see, I very much feel it's important to look at the angels as the origin. Because if you look at the people as origin, then you are stuck with people always being trapped as Obatalas. Just because you're born with white skin, oh, she's an Obatala, everything on her face is an Obatala argument. I've met folks with so-called white skin that were more Legba than the nastiest, grimy cat on the street. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen black folk darker than me that were more Obatala and puritanical and trying to put laws on people than George Washington and Hitler. You know what I'm saying? These things are genetic markers. That's the saddest thing to me about racism, is that they've put angelic arguments into our ancestral markers. We can never fully express ourselves as individuals unless we have the freedom to move away from what our ancestors did. So when you connect something to someone's ancestral markers, it's like putting a ball and chain on their leg. And they always have to work so hard just to prove they aren't what they look like. You know what I'm saying? That's why it's so important to me to recognize the angelic argument rather than just go by the symbols and say that people are making their own choices. You know what I'm saying? I feel that if you understand the angelic argument, that gives individuals the ability to embrace one angel or another angel, regardless of their ancestral markers that say, oh, this is a Legba cat, this is a Chango cat, this is an Oshun cat, this is an Obatala cat. You know what I'm saying? You know, basically, what's on the skin of the matter doesn't matter. It's the actions that are taken that define us, and the arguments that hold up those actions that define us. And the actions and the arguments are angelic, because the angels are the only way anything actually happens. You know, the whole reason that why we have a desire to make laws is because the angels sculpted the world we live in such a way that it makes sense for us to want laws. And the only reason why you would want freedoms is that the angels sculpted the world we live in such a way that we would want freedoms. And you can do that when you've been expressing yourself in reality since the Big Bang. You know what I'm saying? The older the angel, the more dominant their influence. And the oldest angel is always a Legba. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. However, because of that, he has no need to be in conflict with Obatala. Obatala wants to express his supremacy. Obatala wants to exert his kingship. Which is cool, because there are aspects of a Legba that need to be cooled out. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, life wouldn't exist if we were all hot Legbas. You know, if the matter were... There's a reason for everything. There's balances and counterbalances, and it's complicated, and it's all older than us. Every word coming out of my mouth is older than everybody in the room by, you know, sometimes hundreds of years. But you take the words out of my mouth like I'm creating them. We didn't create any of this shit. We were all just kind of, you know, remixing it. You know, and not even remixing it to the point where it's original. We're just, you know, remixes. You know?
So, how many Orisha are there? Like, I know, like, we talked, there's, like, the major ones, but, like, are they seen as, like, minor Orisha, or, like, why aren't they talked about as much?
The Yorubas say that there is 101 Orisha, or 1,001 Orisha. It's a symbolic number. What it really represents is 100 or 1,000 is really one. And they're saying even when you have one, there's still one more. You know what I'm saying? And what's interesting to me is that they do say 101, and they do call them fundamentals, or elements. And there are about 101 elements naturally occurring in the world. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely feel that on a very deep level, the Orisha are the atomic periodic table. Those are the elements that everything we see is, you know? But like I said, the Orisha are a spectrum of symbols and characteristics. So the more you look at Oshun, for instance, the more different striations you can see. Just like the more you look at orange, you see more striations between yellow and red. You know what I'm saying? And the more you look back, the more less differences happen. If you close up on it, you see 9 different colors. If you get farther away, 7 different colors, and farther away than that, 5 different colors. You know, the Europeans felt that the Yoruba had no sense of perspective, but actually they did have a sense of perspective. Their sense of perspective was that the thing closest to you is the biggest, right? But actually, the thing farthest from you should be made bigger, because the thing close to you may be very small compared to the thing far from you. So when you see in a Benin bronze, the procession of the king, the people in the front of the procession are made very small, but the king is made very large. So they had a sense of perspective. It's just they fought against perspective because they felt perspective was a lie, which it is. If you believe in perspective, then when you look at an eclipse and you see the moon move in front of the sun, you'll say, well, the moon and the sun are the same size. But thousands of moons fit into the sun. Perspective itself is an Obatala thing. It's a lie. I shouldn't say it's a lie. It is a complicated gossamer expression of what's actually going on. It's gossamer because once you understand the situation, it falls apart.
It's one angle.
Yeah, it's not only one angle, it's a very weak angle, you know? But it seems to be what's going on. It is what you experience. However, if you understand what you're experiencing, all the implications, like, of course, the earth is flat. Look, the earth is flat. That is an Obatala argument. Of course the earth is flat. However, when you look into it, that argument falls away and pops apart. And you say, oh yeah, the earth is a shoe. It's a ball. It's not flat. You know what I'm saying? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very persistent, these arguments. And once you understand Obatala's arguments and Eshu's arguments, it becomes so much easier to start to see Yemoja's arguments and Oshun's arguments, because they're all contracts. They're all ways of seeing the world and all reasons for doing things in the world. You know?
So when it comes to like the Congo and the Yoruba, did one come before the other, or were these ideas kind of being developed around the same time?
Well, before or after. You see, when you're talking about concepts at this scale, once you start talking about angels, you're talking about concepts that are on a scale that's older than humanity and will exist well after humanity has changed into whatever it's going to be, you know?
Come on, man, give us some dates here. Dates.
Well, come on, man, we got to get archaeologists to go into the forest. You know, I can't say what I don't know, you know, and nobody's done the observations to make it clarity about, and I refuse to just base it on linguistics or on symbols, you know, because those things can easily be Obatala type proofs.
There must be like a whole department in like the University of Dakar or something that
The University of Dakar, yes, but that's not Western Central Africa. I mean, it's a little north of where I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But as far as what I'm talking about, I would love to see serious archaeology happen in Nigeria, because they claim to be the beginning of man. They call themselves Ile-Ife. Everyone around kind of agrees. Even the Congo at a certain level agree. But then the Congo talk about Nzambi and the original ancestor. And they're right too. We all, you know, the original ancestor when you look at the DNA record, you can make arguments about where humanity started. But the one persistent thing that all of the DNA and all the archaeological records and everything, the one persistent thing it says is that West Central and East Africa is the area where it all began, you know? But there's still so much more research that has to be done. And then there's things that will never be recovered. I mean, it's easier to find things in East Africa because that climate, that land preserved things much more readily than the rainforest did.
Right.
And it's much harder to do a dig in a rainforest, and much harder to do dating in a rainforest and all of that. You know, so, you know, I trust observation. I am very much in love with the European tradition of empirical observation. It's
works.
to me, yeah, exactly, it works. You know, and what's interesting to me is how many correlations it has with voodoo, and the fact that voodoo is Dahomey, is a foreign word. And what does voodoo mean? The study of nature, which is all science is, the study of nature. You know, that's why I feel they hinge together so well. Thanks a lot, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.